G'day everyone. I'm Philip, and a very warm welcome. Thanks for joining us on our very first webinar here at Food Entrepreneurship Academy. So, very warm welcome to wherever you happen to be. I know one of our team members, Asha, is joining from Bangkok, where it's really early in the morning there, and we've had registrations from different parts of Asia and the US, and so looking forward to those people joining a bit later on. Without further ado, I just want to say that as I mentioned, this is a really it's special bit of a milestone day for us, really, as we introduce these webinars on everything to do with developing food products, actually. So whether it's things to do with food manufacturing or the food industry or different ingredients and those sorts of things, these webinars and the webinar series is about building knowledge and understanding for those people that are looking at becoming or are home food entrepreneurs. So that's where we are in terms of this series and those sorts of things. But really, who are we and what do we do and what do we stand for and that sort of thing. So we're operate out of Melbourne, but we've got a presence in different places. So as I mentioned just before, we've got our student intern, one of them, Asha, who's in Bangkok. And we've also, we've got a few members of our team here in Melbourne, but we've also got somebody in one of our team in Auckland as well. So, with all that, we have, we operate on a global basis, and we've worked with clients in Europe and North America, Asia and Oceania, and hopefully we're looking at working with clients in South America and Africa. Those are the only continents that we haven't as yet worked with people. So what do we do and why and that sort of thing. Who are we here for? So we're really here for home food entrepreneurs and startup food manufacturers, and these are the people that have typically come from other different areas. So they might have a finance background or an IT background or something like that. And they have an idea that they want to follow in food entrepreneurship, developing, releasing, launching a food product. And that's what we're here for. So we operate right from the concept right through to the launch. So if you have an idea or if you have a prototype, then we can take your ideas, work with what you've got, and follow through right until the launch of the product. So going through all the different stages of strategy development and looking at your target market and your raw material suppliers and ingredient interactions and flavoring and sensory analysis and scale up and pilot scale trials, pre-production trials, and launch, and all of these things. So all of that, and that's why we basically say we're concept to launch specialists, that we do everything right from your initial idea right until you see your product on the virtual or physical shelves in a bricks and mortar store, fulfilling your dream. And so let me just pose this question. How many of you think to yourself, just how many of you have, an amazing jam or sauce or salsa or plant-based milk, for example, or something else, and you think, boy, this is just such an amazing dish, amazing product that I make here in my home kitchen every time, and I just love it, and I feel great about it, and I feel when people share it, the joy that they have in that. And you might be thinking, well, maybe I can share that wider with even more people. But how do I go about that? I'm not a food scientist. I'm not a scientist even. I don't have any idea. I don't know how to start any of this. And, you might have this dream and this passion and the drive and all that, but, you don't know what and how. So you don't do anything. Or maybe, you have a signature dish. So, there might be something that you really, really love making. Every dinner party, friends or family gathering, you bring this, and people say, "Wow, you know, your dish is just absolute amazing. You really should look at selling it, commercializing it." And then you think, "Wow, yeah, maybe I could do this. I could really do that." But then again, you think, yeah, I've got the passion. I really want to do this, but I don't know how to start. So that's what we do. Concept to launch specialists, and that's what we take. That dream that you have, that spark and that passion, your concept, right through until when you can actually see it on your shelf, on these shelves, the retail shelves. So one of the key key elements that we pride ourselves in is our support and our guidance and our mentoring of our clients as well. And we really enable them to have the confidence to deal with the different stakeholders in the food manufacturing space, to really play the game and know how to deal and interact and speak the lingo of all these people. And that's one of the things that we really do, so that you can really feel confident about transitioning into this next phase of your next phase of your life, really. Following your dream, reaching your potential, having this passion that you can go after. So yeah, that's really what we're all on about here, and that's what we love doing. That's what we really love working with people on, seeing their dreams and their passions for food entrepreneurship come to fruition. Lastly, if anyone when you have questions, just put them in the chat, and then at the end, Naushad and I will go through those. Yeah, I forgot to say that Naushad, who is our lead product development scientist, who also leads our academy in front of the Golden Gate Bridge there, and I mentioned Asha in Bangkok, who was one of our student interns, and yeah, and there's me and some other members of our team. But let's get going. So let me share my screen, and we'll be off and running. So I'm just readjusting my screen here, just so I can see everything. Okay, there we go. Let's go. So first and foremost, what actually are food additives? The term is talked about a lot, but do we actually know what they are and what they can do and all this sort of thing? So it's really worthwhile just looking at a definition of what a food additive actually is. And there's a lot of potential misconceptions, or people have different ideas about things, but really food additives are chemicals that are present in the food that are not the core ingredients of the food. So things that people are going to add in that are not really central and absolutely specifically vital for that food product. They're important, but they're more generic. You could put it that way. Now, when I say chemicals, that tends to conjure up negative images in some people. But as I've got there, some people tend to inspire fear or instill fear and all these sorts of things. But really, what is a chemical? And if we look in a very generic sense, a chemical is anything and everything. Everything is a chemical. Water is a chemical, for example. Things like that. So I attended an event last weekend where somebody mentioned about food being chemicalized, and I thought, goodness me, this is just it's almost gone too far talking about food in that sort of way. So a chemical is certainly nothing to be concerned about, and you can see that the word chemical chemistry has a long history dating back to the 1500s there. So one of the things that a lot of early stage food entrepreneurs and our clients come up with, ask us about, is about a clean label. They want to have minimal ingredients. They want to have this so-called clean label, but what actually is it? What does it represent? So we've got here a extract from Choice magazine here in Australia, where which it summarizes that. And yeah, we know it's one of the key trends in the food industry. And they say clean label refers to food or drink which has got a small number of ingredients, natural ingredients, and ingredients that are pretty easily recognized. So, not full of chemical, so-called chemical looking names. Having said that, it's important to know, though, that nearly everything will have a common name as well as a chemical name. So, it's really a matter of how something is represented in a lot of cases. But do we really want a clean label, a so-called clean label? Is it actually important, or is it more having consumers actually understand what is going on in their food? That chemicals and food additives are really not that bad after all, and people developing food products are not that bad, and don't have some sinister motive or something like that. With food additives, they can be unintentional or intentional, and of course we more often think about the intentional ones, but just on these slides here I want to give you an idea on what can be unintentional. So more often than not, we're talking about agricultural, like residues of agricultural chemicals. So fertilizers, pesticides, things that are actually used typically in the agricultural environment, hormones, therapeutic agents. We're talking about antibiotics and those sorts of things. However, these, of course, I can't speak for every country in the world, but I know that in Australia here, these are really, really rigorously regulated under the Food Standards Code. So there's really strict, regulations around that. And here in Australia, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority actually states maximum safe limits for these residues. So there's testing that goes on. There's safe limits that need to be looked at and adhered to. But having said that, and while those regulations are all very very strict and very tight and based on real good real sound science, just want to go through this example. So the fertilizer based on this glyphosate fertilizer, herbicide, sorry, not fertilizer, herbicide, which this information actually came from a group called Beyond Toxics in Oregon, in the US, and they describe themselves as a statewide environmental justice organization. So this is some information on their website where they say they this data of oat cereal samples, pinto beans, with 100% of these samples having residues of glyphosate of 360 parts per billion and 509 parts per billion. And immediately you might think, whoa, this is what's going on here. It's pretty bad. Like 100% of samples seems a decent sample size. And we've got, in the hundreds of parts per billion. But have a closer look at this. So in Australia, the Australian Pesticides and Veterinary Medicines Authority has set a daily limit on glyphosate. So we're talking about, remember, we're talking about the residues here, residual glyphosate at 0.3 milligrams per kilogram. So if we take an average adult in Australia with a mass of 79 kilograms, for example, or 175 pounds, thus that means that we're able to consume 23.7 milligrams of this residual glyphosate per day without any harm. So 79 kilograms multiplied by 0.3. Right, so the third point there, pinto beans have 509 parts per billion, which is 0.509 milligrams per kilogram. So when you do the calculations, you do the maths on these, you'll find out that what it actually means is that somebody would have to eat 46.7 kilograms or over 100 pounds of pinto beans in one day to exceed that limit, which is pretty extreme. I think, before you do yourself harm by having this herbicide, I think you'd be doing yourself harm in some other ways by eating nearly 47 kilograms of pinto beans. So this is just to show that, certain groups present certain information without the full background, and therefore, things have to be scrutinized in a very, very careful and close way, and that the government authorities, really know what they're doing. They're really on the ball with this sort of thing, and they are certainly to be trusted. So that's unintentional food additives. Now, with additives that are intentionally used in manufactured food, they can come from two sources. Well, these are a couple of sources. So they can be produced artificially through a chemical process, such as sodium benzoate, a common preservative, E211. And so we're talking about an actual chemical reaction in an industrial setting, in a factory, which is producing the sodium benzoate. Alternatively, there's another process which is like halfway between natural and fully artificial, which is the one down the bottom. So with xanthan gum, which is E415, xanthan gum can be produced in an artificial setting, but come from a natural source. So using the processes of industrial microbiology and biotechnology, for example, where we've got Xanthomonas campestris grown in an industrial setting, and then the xanthan gum is secreted and harvested for further processing from those bacteria. So it still comes from the bacteria. It's not, from a pure chemical reaction, but it's in a setting that's artificial in a industrial setting. Of course, additives can come from pure natural sources, and we've got an example here of E120 carmine cochineal, also goes by some other names, and in this particular case, it's a red food color, which is extracted from the dead bodies of a specific type of insect that's found in South America. So basically, they catch or harvest all these tiny little insects, kill them, crush them up, and extract the red color out of their dead bodies, or the carcass, if you want to put it that way. After that, and yeah, you get the red color. So that's an example of a pure natural source where they actually go into the wild, for example, and get those insects from a wild natural environment. So a bit more here on safety of intentional food additives and the process on how it goes, how the assessment process goes to ensure that certain additives are safe. So in Australia and New Zealand, we've got the Food Standards Code, which is regulated by Food Standards Australia and New Zealand, FSANZ, which goes through and assesses food additives. And first step, though, is that there has to be a good reason to use them. So technological, nutritional, or some other reason. So somebody can't just say, I want to use this food additive, with no reason and no real good reason. They have to come up with something pretty significant so that it can be assessed in the context of that. So the first thing is to look at the safe levels of consumption. So there's extensive testing, often at high levels, and that results in an ADI, an acceptable daily intake. So for that particular country or that particular jurisdiction, in this case, Australia and New Zealand, an amount that can be consumed daily safely. Then after that, the next step is dietary exposure assessments, where in this case, I'm using tartrazine E102 yellow food coloring, where the ADI is 7.5 milligrams per kilogram of body weight. Now, another important aspect, second point in the dietary exposure assessment, is that these assessment tests, need to be done with the group that is most likely to consume. So in this case, we're talking about colors, colors that are used in snack products or lollies and those sorts of things, for example. So it wouldn't be worthwhile doing these assessment tests in somebody that's 70 or 80 years old or something like that. What you want to do, if they're made for lollies, if they're made for children's products, for example, is to actually do this dietary exposure assessment based on children, naturally, so that you're getting data that's actually related to the market that's most likely to be consuming these products. So in this particular case, we've got the dietary exposure is 0.21 to 0.38 milligrams per kilogram of body weight, and that actually amounts to only 3 to 5% of the ADI. So meaning that the actual amount that is used, is well and truly, in a safe range with a huge margin of error. So this is an introduction to the process of showing how safe food additives are, despite what many people, there's a lot of hysteria and all these sorts of things about food additives, but there's such rigorous testing, such rigorous assessment to show, through this process on this slide here, how safe they actually are. With food additives, there's such a lot of negative perception or information or mindset, I suppose, about them and how they're related to everything. They're all artificial, or they're, all these bright colors and flavors and all these sorts of things. But this slide here is meant to give you an idea that food additives are used for such a diverse purpose, and there are so many different types of food additives as well. Just to show that the idea of brightly colored food additives for artificial flavoring and coloring and all these sorts of things is quite actually quite narrow, as we'll see in this slide here. Because in this slide here, this is a pie graph of the most used food additives in the world. So the largest category are thickeners and stabilizers. And if you look at thickeners and stabilizers, modified starches and emulsifiers, which amount to like 60, 65%, something like that, of all food additives, those are used for texture, mouthfeel improvements, and ability to be processed in a more efficient way and those sorts of things. So if you look at those, 60 to 65%, and what gets a bad rap for food additives, it's the colors and preservatives and all those sorts of things, where if you look at on this graph, the colors and preservatives, then that's only about 20 odd something percent compared to 60 plus for the additives that bring us the diversity of mouthfeel and textures and those sorts of things. Now, nutrition improvement is another really important and really key area for food additives as well. So increasingly, manufactured foods are actually fortified with vitamins and minerals. And you might be saying, why is this the case, especially in a place like Australia and Singapore and the US and countries with an abundant natural food supply, with so much fresh food available and things like that. Well, if you have a look at this healthy eating pyramid that's recommended by Nutrition Australia for Australians, then you'll see down the bottom that fruits and vegetables form the basis of a healthy lifestyle. And therefore, those are the ones that are to be consumed in the largest amounts. But this is the reality. Only 24% of women and 15% of men meet both the fruit and vegetable guidelines set by Nutrition Australia. Pretty poor by any stretch of the imagination, really. So because of this, the government has to step in. But these are adults, right? These are figures for adults. And if you look at children, we can see that this trend is starting early in life. The figure on the left shows that, yeah, while 73% of children are eating the amount of fruit they need, 94% of children in Australia are not eating the amount of vegetables they need. And with the figure on the right, we break this down into different age groups. So if we look at the for example, the big kids, it's got ages 14 to 16, where they're meant to have 2 serves of fruit, 5 serves of vegetables. But what are they actually eating on the left? 1 serve of fruit and just two and a half, just 2.5 serves of vegetables per day. And this translates into adult life, as you could see from the previous slide, where if anything, it actually gets worse from children into adulthood. So that's why the government has to step in. The government has to step in to look after its citizens by ensuring that their nutrition is or at least try to maintain the nutrition of its citizens, because people are just not taking enough action to eat healthily enough and maintain their health, basically. And that leads to obesity, all different kinds of other types of health issues. Then we have spiraling healthcare costs, and who has to bear that? The government. And and the social ramifications and all this sort of thing. So this is an example here of mandatory nutritional fortification in Australia of vitamin D in margarine. And when people think of vitamin D, what do they think about? They think about the sun. But as well as that, vitamin D has got natural sources. And you think in a place like Australia, a sunny place like Australia with the highest level of skin cancer in the world, plus vitamin D that we could get out of food products, and still vitamin D is actually added to food products, which just really shows the state of nutrition of people in Australia, and no doubt in many countries of the world as well, where people are just not doing enough to keep their nutrition at a good level. Therefore, the government steps in. So there's mandatory fortification, vitamin D, as I mentioned, thiamine and folic acid to wheat flour for bread making. But then there's also voluntary nutritional fortification, absolutely essential as well. So fluorine to bottled water, calcium in chewing gum, and iodine to table salt. All of these have been identified by the government as being minerals or vitamins that are deficient that people just don't get enough of. And therefore, the government steps in to mandate or to encourage use of these in food products to try and increase the nutritional status of the of the general population. When people think about food additives, though, the word tends to give an idea about processed food manufacturing, something that happens in the factory, not something that happens in my own home kitchen, not something that I do myself. But with jam making, for example, while many homemade and commercial jam formulations call for pectin, there are some high pectin fruits that you can use that will have enough pectin, but in a lot of cases, it's important to have pectin so that you can have a jam product that's not too runny, because in addition to this, pectin helps to reduce the cooking time. It assists with thickening, which results in less runniness and retains flavor. But in addition to this, sugar and acid, could also be considered additives in jam making. But this is to show that we all use additives, even in the domestic environment, and they fulfill so many useful functions. Now, this is just one of many recipes online for jam making. Now, with only four ingredients, this could be considered quite a clean label: strawberries, lemon juice, pectin, and sugar. But at minimum, it's got pectin, which certainly can be considered, or which certainly is, an additive. So just 4 ingredients, but yeah, there's a food additive there. And is this a problem? Of course not. Pectin is it's got such good uses. It's really important. There's no problem with pectin whatsoever. Now, this slide here is really interesting, but also pretty complicated. But I just want to give you an idea about some of the concepts behind actually what's behind using a additive such as pectin. So as well as acid as well that you might need to add. So these are the things that come into play when you're thinking about the chemistry of in this case jam making, food production, any of those sorts of things. So we've got optimal pH of 2.8 to 3.3. So that's why you might need to add some acid in so that pectin can be most effective. Sugar is important as well. And yeah, it's just to show that there's all these chemical not chemical reactions as such, but just chemical properties that need to be considered when you're making a food product. There's interactions that go on as well, interactions between ingredients, for the good and for the bad, that you need to be aware of. That if something just doesn't work, then it could simply be a matter of, for example, the pH is not right. 2.8 to 3.3. You lower the pH, bingo, it's done, and everything fits into place. Now, this is another example of food additives in the home kitchen. We've got xanthan gum as E415, which I've got a Coles packet here of xanthan gum, and that's used extensively in salad dressings and sauces for stability, to improve the rheology and prevent phase separation and those sorts of things. So I'd already mentioned this earlier as being from Xanthomonas campestris as the microorganism that produces it under industrial microbiology conditions. Now, what's interesting is that you'll sometimes see it, though, on the ingredients label as a vegetable gum, but it's a bacterial gum. So just keep that in mind. But yeah, this is something that people use at home, and yeah, it's a fabulous, really fabulous food additive, as you'll see in this particular slide here. So this is a video on YouTube, fabulous video actually to show about xanthan gum. So from left to right, we've got different sorts of gums and additives that were used to show the purpose of trying to enable a homogeneous salad dressing to stop, in this case, phase separation. So we've got from left to right the bottles: guar gum, flaxseed, chia seed, and then nothing. So 1, 2, 3, 4. And the last one is xanthan gum. So from this, you can clearly see the benefits of xanthan gum. Homogeneous product right during the entire shelf life period. So maintains quality, looks good when it's sitting on the shelf, pours perfectly. The rheology changes with the, when you shake it and that sort of thing. So it's really, almost a magical food additive, really, in its natural physical properties. And if you compare that, like guar gum is the first one on the left there, and that just doesn't, yeah, sure, it's better than the fourth one, which is nothing, but yeah, that wouldn't be taken too nicely, by people, looking for a nice homogeneous sauce salad dressing. Now, the other aspect that I want to go through here is about shelf life extension. Briefly, so calcium propionate is a E282, which is commonly used in bakery products, and what we've got here is a real dramatic effect, really, on the 1 and 2 pictures down the bottom. So if you think about having a bread, leaving your bread out on your bench countertop for ambient temperature for 21 days, you can certainly imagine how it would look with the number 1 on the left there. But having calcium propionate at 900 milligrams, you can see from the table on the right, resulted in no spoilage whatsoever. So yeah, of course, there are preservatives, but this is meant to show, the real dramatic impact, the influence of preservatives. And if you think from a consumer's point of view, you might be thinking, well, I can do without preservatives, I'll just put it in the fridge, or I'll eat it quicker, or something like that. But in this forum, we're thinking of preservatives from the point of view of a food manufacturer. So think of it from that perspective. If you had a bread which went off and went moldy after, say, a week at room temperature, versus a bread that went moldy more than 3 weeks at room temperature, how much would that do? How much would that improve your business? Increased market, you could distribute wider. You might need to invest in temperature control, like temperature control during your post-manufacture supply chain. Certain retailers will be more inclined to take your product because it's got a longer shelf life. Consumers would be more inclined to, look more favorably at your product from the point of view of, it doesn't require immediate refrigeration. They can leave it on the bench, for example. It won't go off really, really quick. So things like that need to be considered from the point of view of the food manufacturer, as opposed to looking at it from a consumer's perspective, which can really increase your profitability, expand your range of markets, source and consolidate yourself into new markets as well. So we've got the last technical slide here is about sodium lactate, E325, which is a common preservative in processed meat products. Now, this can be used to inhibit growth of bacteria and yeasts that cause disease, so pathogenic bacteria, as well as those that cause spoilage. But it's worth just remembering that food safety is an absolutely critical aspect, because we're talking about life and death, right, with food safety versus spoilage. So preservatives, therefore, are not often used for control of pathogenic bacteria. Pathogens are usually controlled through the actual physical processing. So this could be thermal processing or high pressure or something else that's actually done during the preparation and processing and manufacturing of the product. But this gives an idea of the types of diverse microorganisms that can be inhibited by sodium lactate, and the importance in this particular case for preservation of processed meat products to improve the extend the shelf life. So that wraps up the technical information. Now, what I want to go through here, though, just want to tell you a bit about what's coming up. So our next webinar is on in October, and all about getting a food product to market. So in just an hour, again, we'll go through all of the different phases, from developing a strategy, raw materials, raw ingredients, designing the product, ingredient interactions, flavoring, those sorts of things, increasing scale up, packaging, and retailing, and basically everything. So we're going to touch on everything in that seminar, just to give a real brief introduction, so that you can essentially almost like see it in. Apologies for that. I just clicked the wrong button there. Yeah. So just so that you can see in your mind that, okay, so this is what's involved with getting a food product to market, from the concept that I've got, through this step, that step, so on, right until the launch. So that's what we're going to be doing in October, 23 October, Saturday morning in Australia and Asia. And if you happen to be in the Americas, then it's Friday afternoon. Then the next webinar after that will be in November, same days, where we'll be going through protein sources. So particularly looking at plant-based protein sources, comparing them to animal sources of protein, so meat as well as dairy, eggs, those sorts of things. Looking at the comparisons, like protein quality and technological aspects as well, and sensory elements, those sorts of aspects, as well as looking at nutrition. Protein claims, because one of the big things that we've found is that so many clients want to develop a product that's high in protein, got a certain level of protein, but there's different different jurisdictions will have different levels per serving, per 100 grams, for example, of what can be classified as a source of protein or a good source or whatever. But then even if it is a good source of protein, is it actually quality protein? Meaning, has it got, you know, the amino acids that you require, has it got the essential amino acids? And even if it does, then will it actually fit in your particular product? You know, what are the sensory profiles of it? Will it interact with your other ingredients well? Those sorts of things. So there's so many elements to consider. Protein is so important, you know, for many people in their, you know, selection of food products. So that's what we'll be doing in November. Then, really most excitedly, we're introducing our masterclass in the last weekend of November. So during this 2-day weekend masterclass, $95 Australian dollars, 70 US dollars, or about 60 euro, we'll be going through a much expanded version of what our next webinar will be like. So basically everything that you would want to know over 2 full days over the weekend on what will actually be needed for somebody to launch a food product. So really giving them such a good foundation of understanding of, this is the process, this is what I need to do, so that when you come out of it, not only have you gone into it, for example, with your concept, your product idea, but you'll come out of it saying, you know, getting inspired, getting motivated, knowing, wow, this is, you know, I can see so clearly now, you know, what exactly I need to do. I've got my idea. Now I need to do this and that and go in this path. And I need to work with this person and that person at this stage and that stage of the process and things like that. And you'll get absolute confidence and clarity in developing your food product, having a fantastic foundation, a fantastic base from which to start from to really understand what the whole process is about. So with that, I'll stop sharing my my screen and yeah, stop sharing my screen. There we go. And ask anyone if they've got any questions they want to put to any of us. So yeah, Naushad, feel free to take over and brief and say anything you'd like to say, to elaborate or expand on anything.
Yes, so first of all, I would say like it was very interesting slides. Few of those, like, you know, when you shared about the gums and the acids and, like, you know, the nutritions and those sort of things, I think it was very good, insightful for a lot of people joining us here as well. Generally, I think in terms of you're absolutely right. When the word food additive is used, it's just taken as so much negative, like there's so much negativity around, so in terms of consumers' minds, so which is not exactly the same, not exactly the case, because everything like being used, like, you know, that pie chart which you showed, the additives and emulsifiers and stabilizers and, like, you know, those sort of part covers almost 60%, and that's exactly, like, you know, not all food additives, like, you know, are bad. Acacia gum, xanthan gum, like let me give you an example of acacia gum, right? It helps with the stabilizer, it helps with emulsifier, it helps with like different textural properties. Now as well, like, you know, further research has shown that acacia gum is also considered a prebiotic, so it's got that added value added benefit to it, right? So yes, it is some of the product. It is necessary for more in terms of rheology and texture, but it also sort of helps. Nobody likes to see that phase separation, what you showed on one of your slide in the salad dressing. So it needs to look good. Also, the other thing with preservatives as a food additive, I would share that we live in a world where, like, you know, everything is sold in supermarket. Supermarket won't take your product, like, you know, if you are a manufacturer, won't take a product if it's got a shelf life of 2 weeks. 2 weeks is very less time during logistic wise. So like they need to keep at least like 6 months or a year. So if you want to do that, you need to add certain ingredients to which is not harmful to the consumer's body, but also like help sustain that and maintain that shelf life. So it is needed. It is added, and as Philip has mentioned that like in most of the case, the food, especially in Australia, like Food Standard Australia, New Zealand, and in US, we've got FDA. So like they've done the research, they've done like all the studies, and then come up with like these addition rates. So which are safe to consume at that point of time. So I guess in that terms, it is necessary to use those to maintain like the longer to maintain not only with just shelf life but all the other stuff. I've just seen the Alex message here. Thank you, Alex, for joining in. And I'm probably think that you've got a better understanding of additive and I think we surely will probably able to use one of those in your product as well. So thank you. Over to you, Philip.
Yeah. Okay. Great. Thanks. Thanks, Nirshad. So yeah, if nobody's got anything they want to add, then yes, Sharon. Thank you, and yeah, thanks for joining us in our first session. And yeah, we really look forward to engaging and informing and building awareness for for you and anyone else we know as we go forward. So thanks again, and yeah, remember, just whatever your passion is, whatever your dream is, just focus on it. Go for it, and really keep it in mind, and just take the action and follow through. So yeah, thanks everyone, and have a top day. I was going to say.
And I would like sorry guys, just like to add on last few things. A big shout out to Alex from Sydney joining us. He's in from Hong Kong. Carolina from Singapore. Alex from Melbourne. And yes, so thank you guys for joining us, and like all the other attendees. Thank you very much. Yeah, we look forward to see you in our next webinar.
Thanks, folks. See you around.
Thanks, Philip. Great info.
No worries.
Thanks.
Thanks so much for joining, Charlie.
Bye.
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 Thank you, Philip.